Hi, Ahmad Bey, how are you?
Good. Thank you very much for the invitation, Emin Bey.
Ahmad Bey, I would like to talk today with you about to start our conversation with the inaugurational speech of President Aliyev. I listened to this speech and I had a feeling that this is not just another inaugurational speech, but this is something where it was an event where President made some very strong statements about kind of finishing kind of one part of history of Azerbaijan and starting a new chapter in the history of Azerbaijan. And for me, and I think for our audience, would be interesting to hear from you. What do you think? What were the moments in this speech that are interesting for, let's say, especially in Armenia and in the West, like to pay attention to what is new? Is there any new elements in the foreign policy of Azerbaijan from now on that we all should pay attention to, in your
Yeah,
opinion?
you're absolutely right that uh, this is not the ordinary inauguration speech. Right now, Azerbaijan is in a completely different stage of its history. First time Azerbaijan has a full control over it is the whole territories. Sovereignty is reestablished. So that's why it's a completely new era in Azerbaijan's modern history. So that is why, if for the last 30 years, all of the resources that Azerbaijan had, economic resources, diplomatic resources, political resources, military resources, all of those resources, they were devoted for the one goal, to have the victory in Karabakh. So once because of this military operation in September 2020 and September 2023, overall we call it the 44 plus 1 day war, right? I believe that that goal is reached. So now what is now? So that is why now Azerbaijan is in soul searching. It looks for the new goals. It looks for the new meaning for its foreign policy. So that's why I believe that when President Aliyev talked about, for example, Central Asian states and Azerbaijan close relationship with those states, that reveals a lot. So it might sound like a bit different it might sound a bit different to the European audience, but for me, it's closely linked to the European agenda in Azerbaijan. Because, like, no matter what is the brotherly love you have towards Central Asian countries, what kind of feelings you have toward these nations, you should look for the economic backbone for these relations. So if you cannot connect the eastern side of the Caspian Sea to the western side of the Caspian Sea economically, it's going to be just a very short-lived, let's say, expression of love. But no, we see that now there is a quite strong push for the economic, establishing economic connectivity between these regions, and especially the so-called middle corridor, or what in most of the European platforms called Trans-Caspian logistical chain, right? So this is basically the same name of the many. It's the same name of the same. There might be several names, but the phenomenon is the same. It's like the linking the eastern side of Caspian Sea to the western side, and Azerbaijan is going to play that role. And from Azerbaijan, that connection, that logistical connection, can move toward Georgia, and from Georgia through Black Sea, it might move to the, let's say, to Europe, especially to the Eastern and Southern Europe, or it can move toward Turkey, and from Turkey also it can move to the Southern Europe. or it can move through Nakhchivan, like the newly, Zengezur corridor. It might move to the again Turkey, Iran, or other Middle Eastern countries, right? So in this connection, in this context, the connections that we expect to be built in the upcoming years or in decades, we see that Azerbaijan foreign policy is going to be dedicated to this goal that to establish the middle corridor, and Azerbaijan's foreign policy is going to be dedicated to that. So, and when you look to that, in essence, it's basically very much linked to the European agenda in Azerbaijan, because that corridor, it also like ends with like the western side of that project, Turkey, Georgia, Black Sea. This is Europe. The eastern side of that corridor is China, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. So we know Pakistan-Azerbaijan relations, and that it's quite well developed relations. We know that, like 3 days ago, Azerbaijan ambassador that met with the current rulers of the Afghanistan, and Azerbaijan ambassador presented his credentials to the new Afghan government. And also China, there is a quite intensive process going on between China and Azerbaijan. Also, at the same time, we see that President Aliyev last year in April and May of 2023, President Aliyev basically visited all of the Southern European countries. So basically, this Middle Eastern corridor, it's the project that's going to link Europe to China. And if you don't have the cooperation with these countries, cooperation with these economic blocs, it means that it will not be that successful. So that is why when President Aliyev talks about the Azerbaijan brotherly relations with the Central Asian countries, it means it's fully for Azerbaijan. It sounds like that Azerbaijan is going to develop its relations with the European countries, especially with the Southern European countries.
Ahmad Bey, you are basically emphasizing that the sentence he said, that what you are describing, that he said we have no other family but the Turkic family. This is the only family we have.
Yes.
And basically, considering how much, in Europe and in the Council of Europe, everyone talks about European family, about, European values. In my view, it was also kind of a new chapter for Azerbaijan in that sense too, because the statement that from now on, and I want to come to more also this part of this speech, where he basically says that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that for Azerbaijan will not now focus from now on Azerbaijan, Armenia relations. We are not going to seek, actively for peace. If Armenia needs peace, they need to come and, accept the conditions, and then we can have a peace. But we are not going to focus all our, energy, etc., on seeking signing peace agreement with Armenia. But basically, and he also said that there are various countries. Basically, he said any country now is trying to come and mediate between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and they should stop this. So he expressed that he's really annoyed with all these attempts from international community to come and to play a middleman between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's kind of, what do you think for Azerbaijan, what this new direction and course means? Does this mean also in the context what happened in the Parliamentary Assembly in the Council of Europe? Yes, Azerbaijani parliamentary delegations' credentials have been challenged, and so what does all this mean for Azerbaijan? Do you think Azerbaijan is departing from its balanced foreign policy, or how would you interpret this? What are the challenges for Azerbaijan foreign policy at this new stage?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. It's a quite interesting topic, and I believe that we should discuss this issue. We can discuss this issue in quite a long and quite a, let's say, resource demanding topic, I would say. But in short, I have to say that recently there are a lot of push from Russia also to be part of the mediation mission. Russia is back to its classic role in the South Caucasus, so tries to come to bring that role back. Recently, Iran made warning, and actually for the last couple of years, Iran makes warning that no external power should be present in the South Caucasus affairs. Especially yesterday, Iranian officials said that during the meeting with the Miguel Gregorian, Armenian vice president, and they said that presence of the foreign countries in the regional problems might create additional problems. It's basically a threat. So that is why it's not just the European audience might sound that President Aliyev kind of commented on the European aspirations, European some countries movement.
No, I think he meant all countries because in Azerbaijani language he said yerinden duran. Yani he meant like basically there are a lot of powers who try to intervene. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why like it should not be seen like the European Union. It might be interpreted in a bit differently. But I believe that recently we said that there is quite many. So so that is why there are also a lot of talk that Azerbaijan should be part of the Eurasian Economic Union, right? So it's not like the European Union, but the Eurasian Union. There are a lot of talk about that, especially in Azerbaijan public sphere. So with the President Aliyev putting like the stressing that Azerbaijan is going to build its relation with the Central Asian countries. So that's a signal that Azerbaijan opts for the third way. So it doesn't pick any of these groups to integrate. Like as always, Azerbaijan likes to choose its own third way to stay balanced. And I believe that Azerbaijan is going to continue its foreign policy under the new realities. The world became quite marginalized place. It's not like for the last 30 years, you would have quite a, let's say, stable international relations system. No, not anymore. And the room for being balanced, it gets smaller and smaller. But Azerbaijan understands that most probably it's the balanced foreign policy. When you are balanced and alone for the last 30 years, that worked for Azerbaijan. Now you should be balanced, but make sure that the other countries are balanced also. So to create this certain environment around you, so because it's changing fast. So I believe that's Azerbaijan foreign policy vision now. We should not forget the fact that Georgia also becoming, yeah. So we should not forget about the Georgia also. If the Georgian role in the South Caucasus traditionally is to be pro-European, pro-American, and the Armenian role is to be part of the Russian-led initiatives, Russian-led collective security organization, Russian-led economic organizations, etc. Now we see that Armenia becomes less pro-Russian and the Georgia becomes less pro-European. So it means that these countries also, they are opting for the third way. And so that is why now Azerbaijan kind of, when it says that there is Azerbaijan aspiration is fully linked with the Central Asian countries and of the Georgia and Armenia. I believe that's a signal that Azerbaijan is going to reformat its balanced foreign policy strategy, but it's going to be balanced, and they keep that position, not to opt for any options. That's how I see it. At the same time, like you rightly mentioned about the developments taking place in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and I believe that Azerbaijan follows the developments in this platform quite closely. And membership in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe for Azerbaijan, this is quite a good reputational, let's say, it's quite a good label to have that you are a member of this organization if you want to implement big geopolitical projects. That is about also if you want to be somehow related to the European markets and the European political family. So that is why, if you want to make sure that Central Asian countries, Middle Eastern countries, they believe that you can implement certain geopolitical project, geoeconomic project. For example, Azerbaijan with the United Arab Emirates, there is quite a big investment to Azerbaijan for taking the Caspian Sea renewable energy sources to the European Union, right? So it means that Middle Eastern countries and the Central Asian countries, they know that Azerbaijan is a member of the European political institutions, and that's going to allow Azerbaijan to solve most of the problems that between the European Union and Azerbaijan. So that's why Parliamentary Assembly Council of Europe is also quite important for Azerbaijan. And I believe that in this context, Azerbaijan is going to be, it still tries to understand what happened in Parliamentary Assembly Council of Europe, and then take necessary steps. So in the past, we saw that if Azerbaijan membership challenged in any international forum, in the past, for example, we can present two cases. This is the very first one is Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. Actually, it was Azerbaijan was one of the establishing members of that initiative, and also Open Government Platform. When in the past, when Azerbaijani membership, full membership status was challenged in both platforms, what Azerbaijan did, Azerbaijan immediately announced that it terminates its membership in this organization, and that's what happened. But when we saw like what happened with the Parliamentary Assembly Council of Europe, Azerbaijan announced that it kind of takes a pause in their relations, and it did it very last moment. It did it very, and it left quite, let's say, quite a ambiguous moment that how in the future the developments might develop. But it did not take this radical step that it did in the past. For example, when it's about the EITI or on OGP, Open Government Platform, and Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. So that's why the membership in this organization is also important for Azerbaijan. But
so if I understand correctly, Ahmed Bey, Azerbaijan, despite of tough rhetorics, Azerbaijan is still considering its option, and it's basically open, from what I understand, to various ways of development of its relationships with European Union. But let's talk for a minute about Armenians' foreign policy and how it's seen from Azerbaijan. So from Azerbaijan perspective, if I understand correctly, I listened to many experts, so they basically perceive, no matter how Armenia or the West perceives or understands Armenian foreign policy towards Azerbaijan, but Azerbaijan's perspective and feeling is that basically Armenia is not really seeking peace agreement with Azerbaijan, but is winning time to rearm itself. And if we listen to various Armenian experts, that's what they're saying. They're saying that basically they don't believe in any kind of agreement with Azerbaijan. They don't believe that Azerbaijan even will be just satisfied with, taking full territory, full control of its, sovereign territory, but is seeking to occupy, southern part of Armenia, to open the corridor. And basically, there is hysteria in the Western media and in Armenian media, and also, recently, Armenian Prime Minister also openly said that Azerbaijan is preparing for another war against Armenia. That is, and of course, by doing this, there is kind of more emotions and more lobbying and more pushing for giving more arms to Armenia. Yeah, and I think all these billions of dollars coming from European Union to Armenia is perceived, and not coming to Azerbaijan, it basically, again, additional resources for Armenia, which it will free from, let's say, putting their own resources in economic development. And of course, those resources Armenia can, spend on buying arms. So this is how it's seen from Azerbaijan, right? So considering this change, and also Aliyev in his speech, he said that Azerbaijan is not going to, and he basically said that investing in army and modernizing it even more, and we have seen that recent purchases of military equipment by Azerbaijan. But Azerbaijan is basically upgrading and investing more in its military on the one hand, but I would like you to tell what do you think? What would you say to Armenian and Western experts in regards to these policies that Armenian government currently is pursuing? Do you think this is helpful? Do you think this helps to achieve peace? Or what do you think, again, Armenian, Pashinyan or Western politicians, what do they misread in Azerbaijan's policy towards Armenia right now?
Well, first of all, I would say that there are, for the last 3 years, we have seen that Armenian narratives are quite well represented on European platforms in contrast to the Azerbaijan narratives. Armenian civil society, with its unlimited opportunities, but Azerbaijan civil society, unfortunately, with its very limited opportunities. So that's why it cannot deliver certain narratives from all political groups within Azerbaijan to the European. But Armenian civil society and the expert community can do that. And Armenia has quite a well-established presence in media of European countries and the think tank community. And so that is why in many cases you would see that there is a lack of understanding Azerbaijan's position on many European platforms. And again, I explained the reasons why it is so. So that's why Armenia is quite capable in delivering its messages to the European platforms in quite a fast manner than Azerbaijan. So that's why it creates the information asymmetry in European decision-making institutions about the South Caucasus, and especially Armenian-Azerbaijan relations. That's a fact. So that's why we have to make sure that there are enough platforms where, the Azerbaijan narrative also well represented. What happened with the civil society of Azerbaijan in the last couple of years that limited Azerbaijan's ability to be present on many platforms. That's how we should see that. At the same time, you are absolutely right that Armenia talking about that Azerbaijani attack on Armenian soil and Armenia trying to keep the conflict agenda, the open, keeping this issue on the agenda. That's also that doesn't work for the peace from my perspective. You're absolutely right that now Azerbaijan wants to move away from this agenda. Azerbaijan wants to create its own new foreign policy agenda, especially when it's about the cooperation with the Central Asian countries, cooperation with the Southern and Eastern European countries, China, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Georgia, Ukraine, Black Sea cooperation. So Azerbaijan has new perspectives on its foreign policy. But Armenia, my understanding is the case that Armenia tries to exploit the conflict agenda, tries to show that there is a danger. And that kind of helps Armenia to be on the agenda, let's say, on the geopolitical map for the European leaders. And that's in my taste, in my understanding, that kind of destroys the peace agenda, damages peace agenda quite a negative way, and creates a lot of vulnerabilities, both for Azerbaijan and Armenia in the future. If you limit the European-Azerbaijan cooperation, if you create problems for European and Azerbaijan relations, so it means that presence of the European Union actors in the South Caucasus is going to be very problematic. It's going to be very challenging. So in a long term, if the European Union organization's presence is not well established in the South Caucasus, that might lead to quite a disastrous results for all of the three South Caucasus countries. So that's why these topics about that Azerbaijan being, let's say, trying to attack Armenia, etc., I find these discussions quite harmful.
By the way, Ahmed, again in inaugurational speech, President Aliyev, and I think it's important to be said in this interview, so people who didn't listen to the speech experts, they also know it. Aliyev said that he doesn't have any territorial claim. Azerbaijan doesn't have any territorial claim on Armenian territory. That's what he said. And I think that these kind of statements are often not even seen anywhere in Western media, and I would like to come to the relationship between European Union and Azerbaijan, or between Western countries and Azerbaijan. I think from what I hear in certain expert circles in Germany, in France, in Brussels, what we hear is that there were kind of President Aliyev in private conversations assurances that Azerbaijan will not enter Khankendi. Militarily it will not enter. And even days before September events, that what was said on very high levels. But then Azerbaijan basically, with military means, took full control of its own international recognized, territories. And this has been perceived here in Western capitals as, as if, basically President Aliyev cheated and did something that he was promising he wouldn't do. So this kind of basically also is one of the reasons of current escalation and tension between relationship between Azerbaijan and Western countries. So what do you think right now at this situation? Do you think that what happened there in your view? Why there is such a perception or interpretation of this situation, in Western capitals? Why? Because we are coming to the same issue. When this trilateral agreement was signed, you had weapons, mines coming, but Azerbaijan considered that some rules which have been agreed on have been violated and moved forward with pushing its will on its own territory. Do you think there is some miscommunication? What happened this time? Because I think can we unpack this briefly? What do you think happened from Azerbaijani perspective, and how maybe Azerbaijan and Western countries should move on from this issue?
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic, and that requires a quite detailed knowledge on the developments, frankly speaking. You should be one of the persons in the room to know who said what and how that promises were made, so to comment on this issue, right? So it's very hard, but we can assume that at some stage there might be understanding between European Union and Azerbaijan that there will be the use of the force will be very limited when it's about the Armenians. And I believe that was the reason why European Union also was quite actively engaged in this process. In this context, there is one issue that we have to also understand, that from Azerbaijan perspective, what happened in June, July, and August of 2023, that killed the European Union-led mediation platform. So back then, the developments, they are so fast, so that sometimes we are when we look to the developments that took place 6, 7 months ago, like that we see that it happened ages ago, right? So, but in June, July, Armenia and Azerbaijan were discussing the topic that which road should be opened first, Laçın Road or Ağdam Road. If I believe that most of the people they are informed about such detailed developments. And during the meeting with the President Charles Michel on 15th of June, there were certain agreements reached, and Azerbaijan understanding of the issue was that Ağdam Road is going to be used first, followed by Laçın Road. But that plan was not successful. And from Azerbaijani perspective, when you look at that, when presidential aide Hikmet Hajiyev, he tweeted on these issues, he opened the wheel on these issues, he opened the doors, tried to express his mind on this issue, but somehow, like that, after a week, and there was a total silence from the European side, not disclosing like what was the agreement, who is right, who is not in this case. And after 1 week, we had a statement from the Joseph Borrell, not President Michel. And when Borrell made those statements, that kind of like the still, when you see President Aliyev speaking about the EU foreign policy making for Azerbaijan, President Michel and Borrell is completely, they are distinguishing these two fields. So that's why Borrell is being criticized by Azerbaijan, but there's quite a positive attitude toward President Michel, right? And in this context, for Azerbaijan, that's the end of this mission. So the platform is gone. So once the platform is gone, and in August, if I'm not mistaken, on the 8th of August, 2023, there was a session at United Nations Security Council. And back then, it was a quite emotional moment for Azerbaijan. So these two issues that kind of like for Azerbaijan, that was the European Union-led mission is dead, or at least in the pause. So once that platform is gone, whatever promises were made on that platform, if there was any promise, that's gone also. So I see that from that moment, the officials' narratives in Baku changed a lot. Up to that moment, we see that there was quite a big efforts to make sure that Azerbaijani civil society is well represented in the process. But at that moment, because Azerbaijan had if you remember, Azerbaijan sent even like the delegation to meet with the Karabakh Armenians. They were discussing how to use the Sarsang water reservoir to get them, etc. So Azerbaijan was looking forward to the cooperation with the Karabakh Armenians. And Azerbaijan was exploring opportunities how to move on, and it was a part of the European Union agenda. So
basically,
up to the July, August, Azerbaijan was fully acting according with the European Union platform. But from that, it kind of for Azerbaijan, the process was dead, it was destroyed, and so then whatever promises were made on that platform, if there was any process, again, you should be in the room to see if there was a process.
I see, Ahmad, there is a pattern in Azerbaijan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, European Union behavior, which since we don't know details, you're absolutely right. We have not been in these rooms where the decisions have been made. But it seems like every time some agreement has been reached, and whenever Azerbaijan felt that the agreements are not followed by the other side or by the stakeholders, then Azerbaijan felt that its preliminary agreements, are not valid anymore. So if the other side doesn't follow the rules of the agreement, so there is no agreement, right? Like this is at least what we can, see, in my opinion, from certain pattern of behavior of actors here. And it could be also vice versa. So again, we cannot really know because we have not been there in the room. At the end of our conversation, Ahmad, I really want you to tell what do you think? Where are the challenges? I mean, considering what we just discussed, okay, now we're all moving on. We have this kind of new era of foreign diplomacy for Azerbaijan, which has been declared by President Aliyev. Where does it leave Western capitals? Where does this leave European Union, US, European countries? What should they pay attention to? And in this regard, I want to talk specifically about things I currently see in Europe. Like, I see there are many events right now, and these are not organized by some random NGOs. The leading politicians, I see some of the most influential think tanks, even here in Berlin, you know, DGAP, for example, Deutsche Gesellschaft für Außenpolitik, which is one of the most influential think tanks in Berlin. They organize events about for example, destruction or threats to Armenian cultural heritage. And honestly, I think that there should be events about, you know, if we're talking about cultural heritage, in any conflict, you know, there is cultural heritage on both sides, right? And I've never seen in Germany in the last 30 years any event organized by any influential think tank or politicians about the destruction of not just cultural, you know, heritage, but of entire cities and villages, you know, not even one. And honestly, I'm not sure if I tomorrow or anyone approaches one of these influential think tanks that they would gladly organize event on destruction and fate of Azerbaijani, I don't know, cities destroyed, you know, razed to the ground. And this is the attitude. And we talked about, you said that there is lack of weak Azerbaijani civil society. I think there is, this is true, but I think there are bigger factors at play. The perception of Armenia and Armenians historically here in the West as victims. And this is a reality. And that's why, for example, it's easier for any Armenian civil society representative or organization to organize such event or to request organization of such events. Or even if they don't request it, you know, there are plenty of organizations, individuals, politicians who will talk about this. And I'm not, you know, kind of challenging this or won't go into dispute of, you know, saying is this right or wrong. But for me, I want you to tell to our audience, do you think this kind of attitude by, again, these Western think tanks or in European Parliament, recently there was a similar event where Armenians, Europeans gathered and talked about threat of destruction of Armenian cultural heritage in Azerbaijan. But do you think this approach and this current and bigger, so to say, the current kind of aggressive rhetoric and attitude toward Azerbaijan is helping to change Azerbaijan's policies or Azerbaijan attitude? Does it even help to make Armenia and Armenians and their cultural heritage feel safer, you know, and to, I don't know, diminish the threat from Azerbaijan? Like, do you think, does it help or does it disturb? I want to know your opinion about this.
Well, I agree with most of the points that you raised. The main concern, main thing that Azerbaijan pays attention here in Azerbaijan is that this approach is balanced. So Azerbaijan is ready to talk about the rights of the Karabakh Armenians. Azerbaijan is ready to discuss this issue on international platforms, but only with those organizations who have who were active about the rights and security of the Karabakh Azerbaijanis in the 90s or the last 30 years, right? So if you have not talked about the rights and security of the Karabakh Azerbaijanis for the last 30 years, it means that for Azerbaijan, in the eyes of the Azerbaijanis, you don't have moral right to discuss the issues related to the rights and security of the Karabakh Armenians also. So those organizations, those individuals who had an active voice in the past about the rights and security of Karabakh Azerbaijanis, those individuals, they might, like Azerbaijan is quite ready to talk about this issue with the European actors, and that's how it
You
looks
talk
like to
about
Azerbaijan.
moral right, Ahmed, but I'm even talking about effectiveness because I believe that these think tanks or politicians or governments that organize basically event where you have only one narrative, which is Armenian narrative, or I don't know, European perception, let's say, of reality, they think, probably, I guess, they think that this will have effect on, on politics, on the ground, on what Azerbaijan will or will not do. And my question to you, do you think it's going to have impact? Do you think it's having impact? Do you think it's helping Armenians and preservation of their, cultural heritage in Azerbaijan?
Again, like if you don't have a balanced stance on that, Azerbaijan is not willing to do cooperation with such institutions. So the very first thing that we have to do to pay more attention is how to move on with this issue. And after, we have to take into account that there were certain problems between the EU and Azerbaijan before the 2020 Karabakh War. So before EU starting certain mediation actions between Armenia and Azerbaijan, there are a separate track needed to solve certain issues between EU and Azerbaijan itself, right? So this is very important. So without these components, moving forward is going to be very, very challenging. And I would say that, again, if Azerbaijan voice is not well represented on certain platforms, that is not the way how one should reach the sustainable peace. I understand the certain Armenian narratives and the certain, let's say, the framing of the Armenian historical past that has the ways of gaining more empathy and sympathy in European circles, but at the same time, it kind of makes the Azerbaijan audience quite angry. And so the only way how one can reach the relevance in the process in the eyes of the Azerbaijanis, that is only through making sure that Azerbaijani narratives and Azerbaijani ideas, Azerbaijani concerns are well represented on those circles also. So Armenian heritage, according to the UN Charter, each country is responsible for the cultural heritage that's on territory, and Azerbaijan understands its duty quite well. But I also understand the Armenian side, Armenian colleagues, when they raise issue that there are certain alterations are made to the certain church and the historical monuments in the modern-day Karabakh. And I believe that what Azerbaijan, or at least the explanation from the Azerbaijani officials, is that they are being returned to their state the way they were in the 1988 or 1989. So for the last 30 years, when Armenia was in charge of this historical monuments, they made certain alterations. Azerbaijan kind of tries to renovate those historical monuments back. And I believe that there is this is part of the international law also, that if it is in your territory, you have to preserve it. And so the alterations that made for the last 2 or 3 years, as Azerbaijani officials explained it, that's for making sure that these monuments, their original form is saved. And this original form is from 1988. So that's how Azerbaijan sees that. So that's why I believe that these concerns also should be taken into account.
Whatever position of Armenia or Azerbaijan on this issue is, I think it is really, considering the context we are talking about, the reality, I think that many people in Armenia and in Western capitals, I think, underestimate, do not understand how basically not just ineffective but harmful is organizing event where there is basically only one truth and one narrative is presented. And I think that, and I know that you are participating in many such dialogues, I think is very important. That also there is a dialogue on cultural heritage, and there should be some kind of mutual understanding and dialogue on this issue. But for this, of course, we should see less events which present only Armenian or only Azerbaijan perspective, but basically where there are platforms and where the process where both Azerbaijan, Armenian side inform each other on their perspective, on what they see problematic from both sides, and also international community, I think, should really pay attention to avoid these one-sided events, because if you do one-sided event, it basically you are doing propaganda of one side or another side. Ahmad Bey, thank you very much for your time. I know you have to go. I think we covered all the issues we wanted to cover. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon in person.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. It was a great pleasure talking to you and to your audience, and I hope to see you in the future as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.